Hey, everybody, and thanks for joining us. This is the Eon Collective Data Vault 2.0 customer success story with NYU. My name is Keith Belanger. I'll be your host. I'm the technical partner, and I lead the Data Vault practice at Eon Collective. Also joining us is Robert Scott, CTO and co-founder of Eon Collective. And our special guest from NYU is Satya Kunta, who's the Senior Director of Enterprise Data Management. Thanks, everybody, for you guys for joining us today. Satya, I was hoping you could just give us a little bit of an understanding of NYU.
Sure. Thanks, Keith. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for all the time zones. So NYU was founded in 1831, and it has 3-degree granting campuses, and it's a very sought after college, as you can see. So the numbers actually speak volumes. So we in fact had like 100,000 student applicants for the undergraduate for the current year, which is 2023. And we do have a full-time faculty of around like 5,000 employees. And NYU is very distributed. It's kind of it has 18 schools, and it has 25 research programs happening across the countries. And we do also have 11 global sites, which we call, and these are not degree granting, but it's in collaboration with the local countries across North America and South America. And NYU is the largest employer in the New York City as well. So we have close to around 90,000 employees, so to speak. So that's
an interesting fact. I did not know that. That's of all the businesses in NYU.
Yeah.
I mean, in New York, NYU's got the largest employer base. That's
and it does have the largest owned buildings in the city. So I mean, it's pretty spread across.
Oh, wow. Wow, it's very interesting. So that's a good transition into the next topic. So how does NYU leverage data? What role does data play at NYU?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned it. So NYU is very federated. So we have like 18 schools, and we really want to treat data as a product and an asset. So everything comes back to data being a pivotal role in the data-informed decision-making process for schools and business units. So anything you talk about student success or enrollment in applications. So I'll give an example where during the early enrollment decision making, the data is so pivotal that it actually breaks or makes someone coming into NYU. So we kind of consider it very, very critical, and we really want to treat that as a product, and it's literally like having right data to the right people, and all these units are heavily relying on the data. So in terms of student learning experiences or student scholarships and everything, all the administrative systems which are dependent on making any kind of decisions is all dependent on data. So as people say, data is the new oil, or data is gold. So it really is, and we kind of treat this as a product.
Oh, that's great. I mean, I know personally you don't sometimes think of the importance of what data does at certain organizations, especially in that enrollment process, and how it can make or break, somebody's future, and the importance. So it's always interesting to hear how schools like NYU leverage data. I love data in general, so it's always good to hear how people are using it and the decisions that are being made.
And the latest one, I think one thing I would want to also mention is the COVID related activities which had been happening for the last 2 years. I mean, I think if we'd not had invested on our data platforms or modernizing it or changing our technologies, we could not have supported. So we built out everything in-house on the screeners and then the contact tracing and everything. So all was very much dependent on data, what we already had in our data warehouses and across the applications.
Yeah.
I think one thing also then, Satya, we're looking through this list and so forth that's here. And as you had mentioned before that, in New York, you have the, all the buildings and space and so forth, that not only you're capturing information around these different areas, but you also have, we were even looking at locations and space and all those other kind of stuff that go along with that as well. So it's looking across the board. It's student data, it's location data, it's faculty data, and it's unique in the higher ed space for sure.
Yep.
So that kind of transitions good. You talked about how the COVID data was important, but then what was also important was that you had the right architecture in place at the current moment. But let's kind of go take a step back and talk us through going back in time and walk us through kind of your legacy architecture that you guys did have in place.
Well, yeah, and I think picture says it, which has been shown here. So we actually had some of these platforms built for the last 15 plus years, and we had legacy platforms. And I don't want to call this as a legacy, but we do have a lot of technical debt, and we had been carrying along it for a while now. But the processes which were being designed for the last 10 years doesn't function the same way as is, right? So we have to upgrade to the latest platforms or the latest technologies. So we did have challenges maintaining or managing our platforms, and also the processes which were supporting all the data management functions. So there is a lot of code which was very, very old and very, very legacy. So we had to actually spend a lot of time to manage that, and the resources who were dependent on having specific skill set to actually manage this. I mean, we were heavily dependent on the DBAs. We are dependent on some of the ETL developers, and everything was kind of I would not want to call it as hard coded, but it's kind of designed to those primitive ways of doing it, and we were being like carrying along for a very long time. So I'll give you a good stat. So we had actually taken up a cloud journey as well. So we kind of have migrated all our platforms which were on-prem to cloud. So we eliminated our servers as part of our rationalization. So we kind of had 166 servers, and we ended up having 23 servers. So, but that part of the process was trying to understand how we are able to consolidate and then reduce and move out to the better platforms to kind of support for the future needs.
Nice. Yeah, I think many organizations, I know I can see, this diagram in many places with lines all over the place and lots of infrastructure. So very familiar to a lot of people, I'm sure. So, let's talk about, the pain points that solution brought. You did kind of highlight some of those, but in revisiting, what kind of pain points did it bring to not only IT, but to the business at NYU?
Yeah, and I think when you mentioned top 5 pain points, it was very hard for me to only list top 5. I mean,
we had a short period of time, right? To
right,
kind of
right.
hone it in.
So, but I think I mean I kind of listed what I believe everyone would understand, and kind of in this space would know that these are common across all the organizations, right? So technical debt, as I mentioned, yeah, we were like going back 12 to 15 years ago, and then trying to manage multiple platforms, and that has been our biggest pain point. We kind of we're building on top of another, and we were never going back and looking at, okay, is it sustainable enough in the future? So that has been the biggest of all, I would say. And the challenge what it brought was like, I mean, we had people sitting through the nights and the batch processes which were failing, and all the things which were happening. It was very, very tricky to kind of manage both the projects and the operational work at the same time. So we had to actually do the balancing act. But the decisions what we made recently to move to the newer platforms and the newer concepts eased up a lot of that effort, and we have our data team focused on the right stuff and the right management of those processes which were able to sustain it. The next one, I think I kind of mentioned it in a way. We have multiple data warehouses. Every time we kind of build a data warehouse, we try to don't discard the old one. I mean, we kept on carrying that, and the technical debt also is kind of related to that. So the duplicative processes kept on kind of overlapping with one another. What it meant were that we had data in silos, sitting in silos. We had the same process, having data sets, creating different kind of versions of this data, and which actually brings up to the next point, which is there was no single version of truth. So there always has to be a plan or a method on what someone calls one thing to be universal across what people are able to see, whether it's the right thing to be called or not. What I mean is that, I mean, we wanted to actually spend a lot of time on defining it, or contextualizing the data. So we initiated our data governance platforms at this point, like started to work on the business glossaries. Okay, any kind of data definition should be understandable by every other person who are going to be on in the technical side of things. So we started to actually look into, okay, what are the things which we can improve on because of this no SVOT, which is basically a single version of truth. And we started to expand on it, and we kind of created the standards and the processes. Okay, how do we want to kind of consolidate some of these processes? How do we want to reach out to the people and asking that question? Okay, we are going to be creating these data assets, and how people want to be coming in and consuming those assets as such. Some of the other ones are convoluted ETL processes, and again, these are unmanageable. I mean, it went to the extreme levels of creating some of these processes, which we could not sustain in a very long run. And it's not about running. I mean, they were prone to failures, and every time you fail or something fails, and we were very batch dependent. One of the guiding principles which we also adopted were like we wanted to get out of this batch mode of operations, because it's not that we would want to kind of get to a real-time data processing, but that's an aspirational goal we were intending to do, because we don't want to be stuck on sitting through and processing this data overnight. I mean, that's not what we expected to do going forward. So that is and the failures which were related to that, we kind of were trying to reduce that as much as possible. And the last one, and not the least, is that the processes or the design was too rigid, and we kind of wanted to change the whole foundation of the design. And I think that's where the data vault would come in, and which I think Robert would be able to explain more. But we wanted to get out of the traditional ways of designing it, and so that we are flexible enough handling these changes in future, so that it's more manageable and faster delivery and quicker time to market. So that has been some of the guiding principles.
Yeah, I mean, these pain points I think would resonate with many organizations. You know, I think it's very common across what people are feeling out there for sure. So,
Right.
So, you know, Robert and Satya, you know, talk about, so, you know, at some point you guys reached out and you connected with Eon Collective, and I'd like to understand how, you know, when you guys were having that legacy architecture and some of the pain points, you know, how Eon Collective came in and helped NYU, and a little bit about that process. I don't know if Robert, or you want to kind of jump in and kind of talk about that experience and how it came in to help out NYU.
Well, I'll touch on one thing. I mean, a few
Yep.
things, and I think Robert can chime in here as well. The first time we actually came to understand what the data vault concepts and the methodologies, I think one thing you should understand is HireItsa is very tight-knit group, and we kind of get to learn from what other schools and what they've been doing. So there is something which I believe Yale had done, or Eon or Robert was involved in developing some of the foundational stuff. So we got really excited about what was done, and as part of the Workday initiative, and we said, okay, we would want to actually understand what this whole idea about it. And I know there are many data warehousing concepts like Ralph Kimball and Bill and Mon, right? And I think the moment we kind of started to look into data vault, and the more we started to peel that onion, we kind of felt that, okay, I think this is more useful on what we're trying to do here. So I think the literacy or understanding what the whole concept of is. I mean, we spent a lot of time, went to the training, went to multiple conferences. In fact, some of our team actually went to the DV conferences as well to understand what is this all about. And then I think that is a value what Eon gave us. And I think conceptually, I mean, we are at a different level at this point of time on how we want to drive this whole design process to the next level. So Robert, if you want to chime in here, but
yeah, no, I think you hit it, Satya. I think the biggest thing, one of the things, as Satya had mentioned, is one of the differences we see in higher ed is that higher ed reaches out to other higher eds, as Satya had mentioned. And I was fortunate enough to have done a data vault, as he mentioned, at Yale. But when we came over to NYU, it was similar challenges. Right. You talked about the technical debt. You talked about not being agile. That was the biggest thing. It was the agility, the ability to come in and say, hey, look, we need to make a change to this. But as Satya mentioned, they had all these different warehouses that were there. They had all these different other sources that were there. How can you make a change in IT? Satya's group is always come back and like, all right, yeah, we can take care of that, but it may take us a couple months to do. Right. So not only that we had to establish technology that allowed them to be agile and the move to the cloud that Satya did by moving some of the quote unquote legacy applications to things like Snowflake and what have you. We'll get into that a little bit later. But knowing that the data vault gave them that same level of agility, where if there's a change, we can make those changes without impacting a lot of change with regards to the rest of the data vault. And NYU, different from other higher eds that I work with, they're multinational, right? And so forth as well. So not in that, so we needed the ability to adapt not only to what was going on locally and domestically, but also have a methodology that allow us to be able to handle things that were geographically dispersed and so forth as well. So I think along with, if you look at some of these things that are listed here, is understanding that the methodology, and that's what NYU did well. Well, there's a couple different things. There's technology, there's people, and there's process, right? Well, Data Vault handles all three of those things, but it tells you how to deal with the people. And so forth as well, how to communicate and present in the right way. And NYU really had those that wanted to listen and understand. So Satya hit the nail on the head, get educated. And he did that, and they did that by getting educated and going, like you said, going to the DVC and reading up on the books. I brought books in for them. Believe me, I had books. I had to even call up Dan and say, hey, can I get a couple of them signed and so forth there. But they took it to heart. And I think that was the biggest thing. It was adoption, the adapting, a metadata-driven approach as it relates to utilizing data to drive data, right? And then last but not least, we embellished that with technology that allowed us to automate those processes, and also a framework with governance and so forth as the prime focus.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I think we've all seen organizations that struggle with Data Vault is that they haven't gone all in. They haven't bought in. They haven't tried to get educated and learn, and they try to take shortcuts. But here at NYU, really have embraced it and taken in the Data Vault methodology in all aspects of it, not just the model, but every angle of it. And with that, you will have success. For sure.
Across the board. I mean, I got to give a little shout out to Kasturi, if she's listening in and so forth. She was one of the architects, one of the first ones. She came from a pure Kimball background, and she knew ETL and so forth. That's there. But when somebody can really look at a methodology and see how it can be utilized from cradle to grave, it was really that adoption from the team and from management on down. Satya and his team really pushing to make sure that we follow those foundational elements of the methodology itself.
Yeah, right. And I think it's an open mindset, and I think it's all when you talk about people, right, and having to kind of ask a question like why not, right? And I think that was a big thing, and we did ask ourselves, okay, why not Data Vault? I mean, what are the advantages, and why not we adopt that? So I think I would always attribute to anything to the mindset part of it, right? I mean, having to have an open mind to kind of adapt to it. I think it did play a major role for us to taking this approach.
Yeah, the open mind part is big, especially, we're have to all be open mind about, going to the cloud and some of these new architectures and new technologies that are out there. And I think, Data Vault is definitely another one of those where, open your mind. And once you really start absorbing and taking in, you start saying, hey, I can see how this can help alleviate some of those pain points that we've been having.
Right.
So, with understanding Data Vault and then revisiting your architecture, kind of walk us through in between Robert and yourself, the new architecture and what you guys came up with and how it followed that Data Vault architecture.
Yeah, I'll touch on a few things here, and I think Robert can add into.
As needed, but something you know this near and dear now. So
Sure. Yeah. So one thing, as I mentioned, right. So we did not want to sit and run an ETL processes to ingest our data sets from a source system, right? And we have a bunch of them, and we didn't want to kind of go through that. So one thing which I came back with an approach is a CDC process, like change data captures. We kind of are invested on a platform. So I mean, we at Unity, which is brought by Click right now, and now it's working out pretty good for us. I mean, because it's literally we are ingesting our data on a real time basis, and I think the idea here is that once you actually get the data on the data warehousing side, it's totally up to us on when you would want to schedule these processes, when you want to do the processing of this data. So the challenge has always been that we were spending a huge amount of time, a lot of time to actually ingest the data, and we didn't want to eliminate those ETL processes. We kind of switched to some of the serverless compute like Lambdas, and obviously we actually are MuleSoft customers as well. So we have API platforms built in. So we kind of created a new ingestion process or ingestion engine, which actually kind of alleviated lots and lots of issues which we were facing from the source system data ingestion perspective. And I think the landing pieces that we kind of built an S3 data lake as well. So which also is our is a place where we actually leverage it a lot. And then obviously the data vault concepts where we kind of created a business vault and then the raw vault and the things like that, which are purely the data vault concepts. But Robert, please.
No, I think you hit a lot of the key salient points, right? It was a change in the thought around how can you manage data, and manage data as an asset more so than this manage data as, as an afterthought. And the way that NYU adopted, not only did they needed a methodology from a data vault method, utilize the data vault methodology to understand where the risk areas were within the architecture, and adopting a way to easily get information in to our landing area, as Satya had mentioned it here, and utilizing technologies that allowed us to do that. So what Satya had mentioned, you for those of us who went through Data Vault training and so forth, one of the first things we don't want to make changes to the source coming in. We heard about soft business rules and hard business rules and all those other kind of things. But when you look at the picture here, the way that Satya had thought about, his team had thought about the architecture, it was, look, we're going to take the data the way it is. We're going to get it as quickly as we can into our stage, right? Everybody knows about that from Data Vault. But once we have that there, let the power of the technology, we have Snowflake, they bought Snowflake, and so let the power of the technology to actually do some of the other things that we typically need to do with regards to populating our hubs or links in our satellite. But when you really look at it from a business perspective, it's not the middle piece that's there. The middle piece is going to make it easier, but it's really the consumption. It's basically providing value to those that need to utilize the information and so forth that's there. And one of the biggest ways of doing that is what? For those that are on the opposite end of this video and so forth, that's automation, right? And you hear it over and over and over again during this during the DVC. But we had to look at automation, and NYU recognized that as well. And we went through a couple, right? We went through a couple, but we landed on an automation technology. We utilized Warescape And we brought that in. We modeled everything out following the best practices, but it was the automation that helped us allow us to start reducing time. And as everyone knows, going through COVID and going through a lot of things, there was a lot of change with regards to resources. We were really working with a small team, right, Satya? That was there. So how can you work with what you have, but at the same time be able to do more? And that's through utilizing a level of automation that's built into the core aspects of Data Vault and so forth as well. So I'll stop there because I can go on, but Satya and the team at NYU really adopted that metadata-driven automated approach to be able to deliver on the things that we did.
Right, people, process, technology, and you can see a lot of new products. It's a learning curve. Yes, we did spend a lot of time on getting used to these things because traditionally we were not, but I think it worked out, and it worked out pretty well. And I think I'm glad we had someone like Robert to actually guide us through the right directions. And I think, thank you.
Great. And I think that's a good transition into next note. So you've got this new architecture and this new methodology in Data Vault 2.0. So now let's talk about what business value is this new methodology and architecture bringing to NYU?
Well, yeah, I think that going back to the pain points, obviously, the agility right now, I think is the most important one, right, of all the business values. So we are able to kind of build some of these automations and data ingestion processes much faster than what it used to be. The change is very flexible. We are able to kind of adapt to the change, and depending on what changes we were able to introduce, it doesn't impact the whole model as is. So the Data Vault actually does take care of the agility pieces of it. Automation, I think we touched on it, adopting the right technology. So we invested on automation engine. So it's a metadata-driven approach. So that is also pretty much helping us deliver things faster than manually creating these ETL processes, which used to take weeks and weeks of time to kind of get things done. One of the other things which I would really want to mention is the reusability aspect. So what we started to look at is, okay, how do we kind of templatize this, if it's even a word, but we just wanted to create these standards and templates where some of these things which are built in can be reused at a later point of time, whether it's going to be within a subject area or a model or wherever it is could be. So we kind of ended up having these templates or standards where we are able to use it, whether it's going to be an API, whether it's going to be a data distribution layer, whether it's going to be BI, anything related to a data is what we are considering through that lens of reusability. What it does is it actually reduces the dependencies on recreating some of these things. So we kind of are trying to eliminate those by designing the right processes right from the get-go. So I think that is the major part of it. And obviously transparency, as I mentioned, the data literacy portion of it. So we do have a data governance platform, and we do have the business glossaries and the metadata and the MDM approaches of defining these standards and data definitions and data dictionaries. So that is also helping us a lot to kind of bring in the business value to the users as well. So we kind of educating the users on how to use this data, and by contextualizing, okay, where it is available and how it is available. And the thing which I'm driving right now, which is the next step of it, is a data marketplace, which is going to be coming, and hopefully I will present in the next few, probably in the next year or so. But that's the final goal, and we would want to provide a data shopping experience. You, as a data consumer, would be able to kind of search for something, add it to a cart, invoke a workflow process, and consume the data through the proper channels. That is the start to finish. That's a holy grail, and that's what we are going. And what it does provide is the auditability and the transparency on where things exist and what exists and how we are able to provide all this information.
Great. Now it's good to see, positive business value coming out, with leveraging the Data Vault methodology and in organizations seeing that value to help them leverage data much better. That's great. Well, Satya, we would definitely like to thank you for your time. Same Robert, in going over what you guys did at NYU and your success story. We greatly appreciate it. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you, Satya, once again. We look forward to continued success.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us.